All right, so you wanted that we're giving it to you, the real deal on Area 51.
Yeah, diving deep today.
The stuff most people haven't heard.
That's right, the hidden history, the stuff that makes you go, wait a minute, what?
And we've got it all declassified documents, firsthand accounts from people who are actually there.
Oh yeah, we're talking the people who lived it and worked at Area 51.
So buckle up, folks.
This is gonna be good. It's amazing what's out there.
I know, right?
Just waiting to be uncovered.
And that's our mission today.
Separating fact from fiction.
Myth from reality.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We're not going to be speculating about aliens today. We're
Yeah.
going deeper than that.
Way deeper.
We're going to be looking at what actually happened at Area 51.
And believe me, the truth is way stranger than fiction.
You got that right.
Yeah.
Okay, so when most people think about Area 51,
The first thing they think of is,
UFOs.
of course,
Right. But it all really started with
planes.
spy planes and the Cold War.
Yeah, back in the 1950s.
The U.S. was in a tight spot,
They needed to know what the Soviets were up to.
especially their nuclear capabilities.
Enter the U-2 spy plane.
Oh yeah, this thing was designed to fly higher than any other plane.
It was revolutionary,
But they needed a secret place to build it and test it.
and that's where Green Lake comes in.
Right. Smack dab in the middle of the Nevada desert.
A dry lake bed in the middle of
A
nowhere.
remote, isolated secret.
They flew all over the West looking for the perfect spot,
Can you imagine being on that flight?
trying to find a place that would become one of the most secretive places on Earth.
It's wild. And you know what's fascinating is that the U-2 itself, with its unusual shape and the incredible altitude it flew at,
People probably thought,
it was often mistaken for a UFO.
oh, I bet.
Oh yeah, in fact the CIA even admitted that the U-2 program caused a huge wave of UFO sightings
Wow.
across the Southwest.
So the UFO connection to Area 51 starts there.
But not in the way most people think.
Right, not little green men.
Exactly. And speaking of UFOs...
This is where it gets even more interesting.
Right.
We all know about the Roswell incident,
Oh yeah, 1946.
the big one. The most famous UFO event in history.
But get this.
This book we're looking at actually debunks the whole alien spacecraft thing.
Yeah, the evidence suggests that the debris found at Roswell
It was not from a flying saucer.
was actually from a top-secret military project.
Likely designed to spy on Soviet nuclear tests.
It's a whole different angle.
So even the most famous UFO incident might have a totally different explanation.
One that has its roots in Cold War paranoia.
And that theme continues throughout Area 51's history.
It does, like with the A-12 Ox cart,
Oh, the Ox cart.
the CIA's answer to the U-2.
This thing was even faster and stealthier than the U-2.
It was incredible, reaching speeds of over 2,000 miles an hour.
Wow, and it could reach altitudes of 90,000 feet.
It's like something straight out of a spy movie.
But this was happening in the real world.
Oh yeah, and there's more.
There's always more with Area 51.
Always.
What other secret projects were going on out there?
Well, there's Project Aqualine.
Aqualine, what was that?
This project was all about creating a giant robotic drone.
A giant drone.
Yeah, but here's the catch. It was designed to look like a bird
Like a giant mechanical bird.
flying over the desert.
That's crazy.
And then you have the Insectothopter project,
What was that about?
developing tiny spy drones. Like the size of dragonflies.
Get serious.
They were pushing the limits of what was possible.
It's like they were living in the future.
It really is mind-blowing.
So we've got spy planes, secret projects.
What else?
Oh, there's more.
There's always more.
But hold on a sec, there's also a nuclear connection to Area 51.
Oh, yeah.
That's not something you hear every day.
No, you don't.
So tell me more about that.
Well, the Atomic Energy Commission was heavily involved at Area 51.
The AEC.
They had a project called the 57 Project,
Okay.
and they actually intentionally contaminated an area with plutonium.
On purpose.
Yeah, they wanted to simulate a crash of a nuclear-armed aircraft
Oh,
to
well,
study the effects of a dirty bomb.
that's pretty chilling.
It is.
But they weren't just messing around with bombs, right?
No, they were also working on a nuclear-powered rocket.
A nuclear-powered rocket.
It was called Project Nervi,
And they were conducting tests with actual nuclear reactors.
right there in the Nevada desert.
It's mind-blowing, the risks they were taking.
It really is.
All in the name of national security and staying ahead of the Soviets.
It was a different time.
Okay, so we've got spy planes, secret projects, nuclear experiments.
Yeah, what about the people who actually work there?
Right. What was it like to live and work at Area 51?
It was intense, constant secrecy in the middle of the desert, with the risk of accidents always looming.
I bet it wasn't for the faint of heart.
Definitely not. But, you know, some workers described it as a Boy Scout camp on steroids.
What does that even mean?
They had a bowling alley, a swimming pool, even a golf course.
Wait a minute, Area 51 had all that.
They needed ways to blow off steam.
I guess that makes sense.
And there were some pretty unusual things that happened out there.
Okay, like what?
Well, there's a story about how Lockheed workers were banned from wearing coveralls with breast pockets.
Aye.
Because a pen got sucked into the engine of an A-12 during assembly.
Seriously, a pen?
It caused quite a commotion.
I bet they don't make that mistake twice.
You would think so.
Right.
But it happened again during the development of the ox cart.
Another pen.
It just highlights that even in the world of top-secret spy planes, things can go wrong in the most unexpected ways.
You got that right.
So they finally redesigned the coveralls. No more breast pockets.
Problem solved.
And they used to vacuum the runway before every flight.
Why?
Not for cleanliness,
Oh,
to make sure no debris would get sucked into the jet engines.
I can see why with those powerful engines.
A tiny pebble could be disastrous.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The level of precision and precaution was incredible.
It had to be.
It really highlights the unique environment they were working in. It was a different world back then. But amidst all this fascinating technology,
And the quirky stories.
yeah, it's important to remember the big picture. Area 51 wasn't just about testing planes. It was a key player in the Cold War rivalry between the US and the Soviet Union.
That constant back and forth trying to outdo each other.
Exactly, and Area 51 was right in the thick of it all.
Like a real-life spy thriller.
Speaking of which, the story of Francis Gary Powers and the U-2 incident in 1960 really captures that feeling.
Oh yeah, the U-2 incident was a huge deal. Powers was on a top-secret mission, flying his U-2 across the entire Soviet Union.
Trying to gather intelligence on their military capabilities.
It was an incredibly risky mission.
It was the first time they'd attempted to fly across the whole country from south to north.
And by this point, the Soviets knew about the U-2 program.
They were on high alert,
And sure enough, Powers was shot down over Soviet territory.
causing a major international incident.
Khrushchev was furious, accused the U.S. of spying, demanded an apology from Eisenhower.
The U.S. tried to downplay it at first,
Like they always do.
claimed it was a weather plane that had strayed off course.
Oh, come on.
But the Soviets had captured Powers alive along with the U-2 wreckage.
Busted.
They had undeniable proof.
That must have been so embarrassing for the U.S. and a propaganda win for the Soviets.
It was a major setback for the U.S. intelligence community.
And I bet it really ramped up the tension between the two superpowers.
Absolutely. It had a ripple effect throughout the intelligence community, leading to projects like Project Palladium.
Project Palladium, what was that about?
It focused on developing electronic countermeasures to jam Soviet radar systems.
So they could continue spying.
Well, they needed to make sure their spy planes wouldn't be detected so easily in the future.
Makes sense.
And one of the key figures in this project was T.D. Barnes, a young radar expert recruited by the CIA.
So Barnes was like a real-life Q from James Bond.
He was a brilliant engineer with a deep understanding of radar technology.
And he ended up at Area 51.
He started out at a remote tracking station in Nevada, monitoring all these classified flights, including the U-2 and even the XB-70.
The XB-70, that massive experimental bomber.
The one they called the Valkyrie.
Yeah, it was supposed to be the ultimate supersonic bomber.
But it never really lived up to its expectations.
So Barnes was right there in the middle of all this top-secret activity.
He was, and his expertise in radar proved crucial in a number of situations.
Like what?
He was even called upon to disarm a misfired missile at the White Sands Missile Range.
Whoa, talk about a high-pressure job.
It was. It's incredible when you think about it.
It is. It's those first-hand accounts, those personal stories that really bring history to life.
They do.
Hearing about Barnes's experiences, the long hours, the pressure, the constant secrecy.
It makes you realize that behind all the technology and politics, there were real people living this history.
And taking incredible risks.
Yes, and that secrecy, while necessary in some ways, also had unintended consequences.
Okay, like what?
The Bay of Pigs invasion in 1961 is a prime example of how secrecy can backfire, leading to miscommunication and ultimately disaster.
Oh yeah, the Bay of Pigs. That was the CIA's attempt to overthrow Fidel Castro in Cuba.
Right. The plan was to train and equip Cuban exiles to invade and spark an uprising against Castro.
But it was a complete disaster.
The invasion force was quickly defeated, and it turned into a major embarrassment for the U.S.
And you're saying this was partly due to secrecy?
Yes, one of the contributing factors was the lack of communication between different agencies involved.
So they weren't all on the same page.
No, the CIA was leading the operation, but the military had serious doubts about the plan.
But they didn't speak up.
No, there was a culture of compartmentalization where people were afraid to speak up or challenge authority.
So basically they were so focused on keeping things secret that they ended up shooting themselves in the foot.
It's a classic example of how secrecy can be counterproductive.
It's tragic, really.
It is. And this lack of transparency also made it difficult to learn from mistakes.
So what happened after the Bay of Pigs?
Well, Lyman Kirkpatrick, a CIA inspector general, was sent to Area 51 to assess the situation.
What did he find?
He found a base that was still reeling from the U-2 incident and struggling to adapt to the changing landscape of the Cold War.
So they were still trying to figure things out.
The secrecy that was supposed to protect them had also become a barrier to effective communication and progress.
It's interesting how these events connect. You can see how one failure can lead to another.
It's a chain reaction.
And how the very thing that was supposed to keep the U.S. safe, secrecy, also made them vulnerable.
It's a complex issue.
It is. But despite these setbacks, the development of new technology continued at Area 51.
It did. Amidst all this turmoil, they were working on the A-12 Ox cart,
The CIA's answer to the U-2,
the plane designed to fly even higher and faster.
and virtually invisible to radar.
It was a technological marvel, a testament to the ingenuity of the engineers at Lockheed's Skunk Works.
I bet there were some interesting stories that came out of that period.
Oh, definitely. For example, even with all the advanced technology, they still had to deal with surprisingly mundane problems.
Like what?
Remember that story about the pen getting sucked into the A-12's engine?
Yeah.
Well, it happened during the Ox cart's development, too.
No way.
It just highlights that even in the world of top-secret spy planes, things can go wrong in the most unexpected ways.
It makes you wonder how they ever got anything done.
It does. But they did. They were constantly learning and adapting.
Like redesigning the pilot's coveralls to get rid of the breast pockets.
Exactly. It's a funny anecdote, but it also shows how they were constantly innovating.
And they had to adapt quickly because the world was changing rapidly.
It was. By the early 1960s, the focus was shifting from spy planes to satellites.
Satellite.
The Soviets had launched Sputnik in 1957, which kicked off the space race.
And raised concerns about the vulnerability of U.S. intelligence gathering.
Right. The U.S. realized they couldn't rely solely on spy planes anymore.
They needed a new way to keep an eye on the Soviets.
And satellites provided that capability.
So how did Area 51 fit into this new era of space-based intelligence?
Well, they didn't abandon spy planes altogether.
Okay.
They were still developing and testing new aircraft, but they were also starting to experiment with new technologies like drones.
Drones back in the 60s.
It might sound surprising, but the concept of unmanned aerial vehicles had been around for a while.
So Area 51 was on the cutting edge of drone technology.
They were. And with its secrecy and remote location, it was the perfect place to experiment with these new ideas.
So what kind of drone projects were they working on?
One of the most intriguing projects from this period was Project 57.
Project 57. Tell me more.
This one's a little unsettling. It involved intentionally contaminating a section of Area 51 with plutonium to simulate the crash of a nuclear-armed aircraft.
Whoa.
They wanted to study the effects of a dirty bomb and how to handle such an incident.
That's a pretty intense experiment. It shows just how seriously they were taking the threat of nuclear war.
They were willing to go to extreme lengths to prepare for any possibility.
And the nuclear connection goes even deeper. Remember Project Nervea, the nuclear-powered rocket engine we talked about earlier?
Yes.
Well, they were actually conducting tests with live nuclear reactors in the Nevada desert.
The risks they were taking are mind-boggling.
It's amazing how much of this was kept secret for so long.
I know. It makes you wonder what else might be hidden in those archives.
It does. And as we've seen, secrecy can have consequences.
Definitely. It allowed for incredible innovation, but it also created a culture of compartmentalization and distrust.
And that lack of transparency became even more problematic during the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962.
One of the most dangerous moments in human history.
The Cuban Missile Crisis. That was when the world came closest to nuclear war.
It was. And Area 51 played a role in that event.
Really? What happened?
The U-2 spy planes, those same aircraft that were once mistaken for UFOs, played a crucial role in gathering intelligence on the Soviet missile sites in Cuba.
So they were spying on the Soviets again?
They were. They provided the photographic evidence that convinced Kennedy that the Soviets were indeed deploying nuclear missiles just 90 miles from U.S. soil.
Wow, those grainy black and white photos from the U-2s might have literally saved the world from nuclear annihilation.
It's a chilling thought, isn't it?
It is. It really underscores the high stakes involved and the crucial role that intelligence gathering played during the Cold War.
It does. And it highlights the unintended consequences of secrecy.
Right.
While it allowed for the development of incredible technology like the U-2, it also hindered communication and created distrust.
Even within the U.S. government itself.
Yes.
So we've gone from spy planes to nuclear tests to a near-apocalyptic confrontation.
It's been quite a journey.
It has. Where does this story go from here? What happens as the Cold War starts to wind down?
Well, things were definitely changing, but they didn't just shut everything down.
Right, because the Cold War might have been winding down,
Yeah,
but there were always new threats emerging.
always. And Area 51 adapted.
So they stay out busy.
Oh yeah, they continued to play a crucial role in developing and testing new technologies.
And one of the most iconic projects from this period,
It's got to be the SR-71 Blackbird.
the Blackbird. Oh man, that thing is legendary.
It is.
Faster and stealthier than the A-12, able to outrun any missile, virtually undetectable by radar.
A true marvel of engineering.
And it's still the fastest manned air-breathing aircraft ever built.
That's right.
It just shows you how that rivalry with the Soviets, even as the Cold War was ending, continued to drive innovation.
They always wanted to stay one step ahead.
And the U.S. wanted to maintain its technological edge.
Of course.
And Area 51 was the place to do it.
The perfect place.
But it wasn't all about spy planes anymore.
Right.
Right? I mean, we talked about those early drone experiments.
Yeah,
Did that line of development continue?
absolutely. In a big way, as the nature of warfare evolved, the need for unmanned aerial vehicles or drones became more and more apparent.
So drones really started to take off.
They did, and that where a lot of that development and testing took place.
Area 51.
Got it.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Secrecy, remote location, all of that.
Exactly.
But what kind of drones are we talking about here? This is the late 20th century, not the kind of sophisticated drones we see today.
True, but the seeds were planted back then.
Give me an example.
The Predator drone.
Predator?
It was initially designed for reconnaissance, gathering intelligence from the air.
Okay, so basically spying.
Basically. But eventually it was armed with Hellfire missiles and used in targeted killings.
Wow, that's a pretty big shift from spying to actually carrying out attacks.
It is a significant shift,
A chilling example of how technology can be adapted.
and sometimes with unintended consequences.
Absolutely. And the secrecy surrounding Area 51 made it the perfect place to develop and test these new weapons away from public scrutiny.
It did.
So it's a bit of a mixed bag. Then Area 51 continuing to play a role in national security, but also venturing into some ethically ambiguous territory.
Yeah, that's the reality of technological advancement. I suppose it's a double-edged sword.
For sure. But amidst all the secrecy and intrigue, it's important to remember the human side of things.
Right.
I mean, there were real people working at Area 51.
There were.
People who were dedicated to their jobs and who sometimes faced incredible risks.
Absolutely.
So tell me about some of these people whose stories really stood out to you.
Well, one story that really got to me was that of Ken Collins.
Ken Collins, who was he?
He was an A-12 pilot who survived a really bad crash in 1963.
What happened?
His plane broke apart in mid-air, forcing him to eject at supersonic speed.
Oh, wow. At supersonic speed, I can't even imagine.
He managed to parachute to safety, but the crash site was in a remote part of Utah.
Oh, no.
And he had to evade capture by Chinese agents who were operating in the area at the time.
Talk about a bad day at the office.
That's an understatement. It's a testament to his skill and courage, not just as a pilot, but as a survivor.
It really humanizes the whole story of Area 51.
It does.
It reminds us that behind all the technology and secrecy, there were individuals with their own extraordinary experiences.
Right, and Collins's story is just one of many.
I'm sure it is.
There were engineers, technicians, support staff, all sorts of people who contributed to the work at Area 51,
All playing their part.
each with their own unique perspective.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground today. From Cold War spy planes to nuclear tests, giant robot birds, dragonfly drones, near-apocalyptic confrontations.
Yeah, what's the big takeaway here?
Right. What can we learn from this deep dive into Area 51's history?
I think one of the most important lessons is that technology is constantly evolving, and the way we use it has huge consequences.
For better or for worse.
What starts as a tool for intelligence gathering can become a weapon of war. What begins as a research project can lead to ethical dilemmas we never anticipated.
It's a reminder that we need to be careful about the choices we make,
Yeah.
both as individuals and as a society,
Right.
when it comes to developing and using new technologies.
We need to think about the potential consequences, both good and bad.
Absolutely. And I think another important lesson is the need for transparency and accountability.
I agree.
The secrecy that surrounded Area 51 for so long allowed for some incredible innovations.
Yeah,
It also created a system that was prone to abuse and mistakes.
right. A lack of transparency can lead to all sorts of problems.
So even in matters of national security, there needs to be a balance between secrecy and openness.
It's a tough balance to strike, but it's crucial.
Well said. And at the end of the day, Area 51's story is a human story.
It is.
It's a story about ingenuity, risk-taking, the pursuit of knowledge. But it's also a story about the choices we make and the consequences we face.
And those choices and consequences continue to shape our world today.
Area 51, once a place shrouded in mystery and speculation, is slowly revealing its secrets. And as we've seen, the truth is often more fascinating and more complex than anything we could have imagined.
And who knows what the future holds as technology keeps advancing? What new secrets will Area 51 conceal? What new challenges will we face, and what choices will we make?
That's something for all of us to think about. So much food for thought.
Indeed.
This has been an incredible journey. Thanks for taking so long.
It's been my pleasure.
And to all of you listening out there, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and never stop being curious about the world around you. Who knows what mysteries you might uncover.
There's a whole universe out there waiting to be explored.
That's right.
At the end
Until
of this
next time,
podcast,
folks,
please share
keep
your
looking
thoughts on the
up.
book, and if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like and subscribe for more.